Meeting to order. We'll ask the cameras to leave. This morning we're dealing pursuant to Standing Order 108-2, study of Canada Revenue Agency's efforts to combat tax avoidance and evasion. And the witness before us this morning is Gregory Wiebe, who's a partner with KPMG. Welcome, Mr. Wiebe. And I do understand you have legal counsel with you. He's certainly welcome to sit at the table. You are the witness, but he is welcome to advise you at any time he so decides. And I understand you're not before the committee every day. So this is a new experience. Welcome, and the floor is yours. You have some notes you handed out to committee.
Yes, I do. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the invitation to appear before this committee. I've been with KPMG Canada for over 30 years and recently completed a term as KPMG International Global Head of Tax. Before that, I was managing partner of KPMG Canada's tax practice, and before that, led our tax practices in Vancouver, Calgary, and in my hometown, Winnipeg. We welcome this opportunity to help bring clarity and understanding to a number of issues that are important to us as Canadians, and particularly the accounting profession, including our firm, KPMG. KPMG is an active member of CPA Canada, the body that sets and enforces the standards for more than 200,000 accountants in Canada. Every day, accountants across the country help their clients with all sorts of financial issues, including helping them comply with the myriad of complex tax rules. Our firm has been serving Canadians for close to 150 years. Over those years, we have continually evolved our practices to meet the changing needs and expectations of our clients and society as a whole, a fact which is critical to this discussion. Tax planning is an acceptable part of our tax system. As the Supreme Court of Canada explained in 2013, and I quote, "Every taxpayer is entitled to order his or her affairs so that the tax payable is less than it otherwise would be. Taxpayers often engage in tax planning to achieve this result." End of quote. With that in mind, the Isle of Man tax plan, which has been subject of much discussion and media attention in recent months, was created in 1999 and hasn't been implemented for close to 10 years. To understand the facts around this particular plan, we need to try to put ourselves back in that environment 17 years ago. Simply put, we can't take a 2016 lens to look at a 1999 issue. In the late 1990s, the approach to tax planning in our profession and society as a whole was different than it is today, both in Canada and around the world. The fact is, the late 1990s was a time when non-resident trusts were permitted under Canadian law as a matter of government policy. In fact, they were encouraged by the federal government as a way for immigrants with financial means to come to Canada while keeping some of their funds abroad. It was in this environment in 1999 that this tax plan was created. As is the case with all our tax plans, it fully complied with all applicable tax laws. We conducted extensive internal and external due diligence, including going so far as to obtain independent legal opinions from leading tax experts, both in Canada and in the Isle of Man. With this diligence in hand, we implemented this plan 16 times, of which 13 are known to the tax authorities. We haven't used one of these plans in almost a decade. If we now roll the conversation forward to 2016, the world has changed for every business, including the accounting profession. And so we, too, have modified our business practices to meet the expectations of our people, our clients, and our communities. For example, KPMG strongly supports and was proud to have been involved in the OECD G20 Base Erosion and Profit Shifting Initiative, designed to allow jurisdictions to work together to lay the foundations of a modern international tax framework. Further, we ceased offering the tax plan to clients many years ago because both our tax practice and the national and global context changed regarding acceptable tax planning. And we have done more. By 2006, any significant tax plan required a review by independent partner committees regarding the general anti-avoidance rule, transactional tax matters, risk and reputation, and other areas deemed appropriate by our professional standards. In 2009, we developed and deployed a global tax code of conduct, a document that sets forth the commitments we make every day to our people, our clients, the tax authorities, and our communities. It spells out our responsibilities as individuals and as leaders and requires us to act as role models, promoting ethical behavior and ensuring that our actions serve to reflect our values. Like every business, we've changed dramatically since 1989. One area where we have not changed, however, is the importance that we place on client confidentiality. Client confidentiality is not just a KPMG issue, it is a cornerstone of the accounting profession. We have a legal and professional obligation to keep client information confidential. As all of you can appreciate, if Canadians could not trust their accountants to keep their private business affairs private, there would be no accounting advice. Client confidentiality is a key issue at stake in this debate. In 2013, the CRA applied to the federal court to require us to disclose the names of all of our clients who use this tax plan. We opposed that order on principled legal grounds because of the precedent it sets around client confidentiality and the impact that precedent would have on our entire profession. The existence of this ongoing litigation has resulted in us being limited in what we can and cannot discuss publicly, which in turn has led to an unfortunate imbalance in the depiction of our firm in the media. But as inconvenient as it is for us, the principle is too important to the profession to forego. I'd like to conclude my remarks by talking about our team. KPMG Canada employs 6,400 employees in 40 offices from Victoria to St. John's. Globally, the KPMG network employs 175,000 people in 155 countries. Our people in Canada and around the world come to work every day to help our clients with the business challenges they face. We help small business owners meet their payroll. We help Canadian businesses grow, expand, and be successful internationally. We help protect Canadian investors through our audit services. We help Canadians meet their tax obligations. And finally, we help our communities prosper by volunteering our time and expertise. Our people do all of this while living by the values of our organization. One value stands out above the rest. Above all, we act with integrity, including, most importantly, acting within the law. What is being portrayed in the media is not who we are. It is not what we stand for. We are incredibly proud of our team and the difference each of them make to each other, our clients, and their communities every day. Each member of our team is committed to and supportive of the continued evolution of our world to a place where there's more trust in the role of government, the role of the accounting profession, and confidence by society in the fairness of the tax system, both in Canada and globally. We appreciate this opportunity to provide context and contributing to the ongoing discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wiebe, and thank you, too, for providing your speaking notes in both official languages so that committee members have the benefit of them. Starting for the first round of questioning, 7 minutes, and I believe, given the time frame we have until 12:30, we can get everyone on for one series of questions. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for attending today. I'll get right to my questions because I have several, and hopefully I can get through them all. You mentioned in your testimony that this plan, the Isle of Man tax plan, had been used 16 times. The CRA is aware of 13. Why have you not provided the names of the other 3 involved to CRA?
That's exactly the point of the court case that is before the federal court. It is our view that it's our responsibility to keep our clients' affairs private, and we take that responsibility very seriously. It's a responsibility from a KPMG perspective. Frankly, it's a professional obligation we have as CPAs in Canada to keep our client information private. Just as you would expect if you when you go to your doctor that they keep your medical information private, we are very serious about keeping our client affairs private as well. And that's the point of the case before the courts.
Thank you. In regards, I'm not going to add any commentary. I obviously have opinions on that, but like I said, I want to get through as many questions as possible. It's my understanding through some media reports that have come out that CRA provided amnesty for up to 26 KPMG clients. If the tax scheme that's being reported was only used 16 times, why are there 26? Is it for multiple people within one family?
There were 16 implementations of the plan, which involved 27 individuals or 27 parties. And that's where the discrepancy in the numbers that you would have there would come from.
Thank you. Was KPMG also provided amnesty for your role?
I'm
From
not
CRA?
allowed, because of settlement privilege, I cannot talk to the details of the settlement at all, unfortunately.
Including whether or not you had to pay restitution?
I'm not allowed to talk to any aspect of the settlement, but if you'd like, I can give some perspective on the aspect of tax settlements in Canada on a general basis.
No, I'm more interested in your involvement
Okay.
in this, but thank you for that
You're welcome.
opportunity. What was the total revenue received by KPMG for this particular package offered?
The 16 implementations, the average fee was around $100,000. So the total fees that we would have received for implementing this particular plan was just shy of $1.6 million, in the $1.5 to $1.6 million range. It was a fixed fee per implementation. It was not a contingent fee or whatever.
Who were the CRA employees that negotiated the amnesty deal with KPMG and your clients?
As I said earlier, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to talk about any aspect of the settlement because it's subject to settlement privilege.
Who were your main contacts with CRA on this series, this package?
As I said earlier, that's one aspect of this conversation which I unfortunately cannot get into.
Is Jeff Sardian, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing his last name wrong, still employed with KPMG?
Yes, he is.
Did he advise or have any involvement in the Isle of Man package?
I'm not allowed to talk about the settlement package.
Sorry, not the settlement package, the Isle of Man package, not the
tax
settlement.
plan?
Yes.
No, the tax plan was created in 1999. I think he's been with us for a couple of years now. So 1999 was when it was developed. The last time it was implemented was 2003. There was one it was different facts and circumstances, one further implementation in 2007. But for all intents and purposes, that plan wasn't implemented after 2003.
But since his employment, the CRA did begin to investigate some of KPMG's employees. Was he involved or did he advise on any strategy or any type of involvement once you found out CRA was
That would be
investigating?
part of the whole settlement discussion, which is an area I just can't get into, unfortunately.
But it's not settlement I'm asking about. Let me ask it this way. At what point was KPMG advised that CRA was investigating this Isle of Man package?
I don't think I know the specific dates, but
Year?
But I don't think I know the specific.
Mr. Weeb, if you're not sure of specific dates, you can always get back to them
Okay, yeah,
on us.
sure.
That's the
Thank you.
easiest way,
Easiest
rather
way to
than
do it. Thank you.
incorrect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then similar questions for Mr. Paul Lynch. Is he still employed with KPMG?
Yes, he is. He's
And
a partner with us.
when was he hired?
I believe he was hired 5 years ago, but I can get back to you on that.
Thanks. And
Might be 6.
similar question in terms of his involvement once CRA began investigating your clients on the Isle of Man product.
Yeah, that will be all part of the settlement privilege, and I can't get into that particular part of the investigation, unfortunately.
And I think, Mr. Chair, those are the questions I have. How much time do I have?
You've got about a minute left.
Okay.
You got one more.
In regards to CRA, not specifically to the Isle of Man, how many ongoing investigations do they have with clients of KPMG?
I don't know the answer to that, but I will say that I'm very proud of our track record with our clients and with the CRA. There are always disputes that occur between the tax authorities and taxpayers, as you know, but our track record with the CRA and dealing with tax matters with our clients is something I'm very, very proud of.
And
very proud of.
If I can squeeze in one more, generally speaking, not on this product specifically, but when you're dealing with CRA and investigations of your clients, do you tend to deal with the same people, or is it a case-by-case officer that deals with it?
We've got 1,400 tax professionals within KPMG here in Canada, and I wouldn't hazard to guess how many people that they have employed at CRA, but no.
But I'm talking about investigations, not, questions and products. I'm talking about when they start investigating.
The way the Canadian tax system would work, there would be hundreds of conversations a day between our clients as taxpayers and the CRA, so it happens on a very routine basis. Whether it's large clients, small clients, it's something that's daily.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you both. I can tell you, Mr. Wiebe, that every MP around here certainly knows about tax disputes between CRA and most often people who don't have the benefit of an accountant that come to our offices. We see them in tears. Ms. Rayett, 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. Wiebe. In your experience, how often do you see criminal prosecutions coming for tax evasion from the CRA?
That's fairly rare. I mean, tax court cases overall are fairly rare. I think there's something like 80,000 notice of objections filed each and every year by taxpayers who dispute what the CRA has suggested is the right answer from a tax perspective. And I think in total, there's something like only 3,400 tax court cases in progress right now, and they can take many years, and very, very few of them are criminal in nature.
Compare that to the United States for me, if you could.
I don't have the numbers, unfortunately, to the U.S. I do know that the way our system needs to work and does work in a self-assessing system is that, taxpayers are expected to self-assess. CRA is expected to do their job and review the particular aspects of their tax filings. Conversations happen if there's a dispute. Sometimes it goes to court, but in the Canadian context, that's very rare.
Yeah.
Very rare. They're encouraged to settle because the tax system, the court system just can't handle that, any volume.
About this particular scheme that was developed and marketed by your firm, I find it curious the terminology that you use in here, your speaking notes about how the world has changed. Therefore,
Yes.
You're not doing now what you did in 1999.
Right.
Is it possible that one of the reasons why you do it differently is because of the charges that KPMG were subject to in the United States around the time period of about 2005, having to do with offshore tax havens? Did that cause KPMG Worldwide to take a different decision on these kinds of schemes?
I think that's part of it. I mean, if you go back in the history of taxation, I see it now that there's three lenses. At one time, there was only one lens. Was it legally effective? Yes or no? If it was legally effective, yes or no, then it was an effective tax plan, and away you went. In 1988, the Department of Finance introduced a general anti-avoidance rule, which brought a different concept into the whole idea of taxation and really started to change behavior. It basically said if there's a tax benefit and it was an inappropriate tax benefit because it abused a section of the Income Tax Act or it wasn't what Parliament intended, then you could undo the legal aspect of it. That was 1988, and the first Supreme Court case, these things take a while, but the Supreme Court first heard on that in 2005, and since that point in time, there's been this evolution of is it abusive or not abusive? Is it in keeping with the spirit of the Act? But there's a third element, and I call it kind of a reputational lens that has been developing, I think, over kind of the last 12 to 13 years. And and some of it is because of some of the pressures that taxpayers would be under, multinationals would be under, tax advisors like ourselves around the world would be under. But we've been following that pretty closely, and that's part of the reason why in 2009 we developed our global tax code of conduct to reflect this this changing world, because it is a very different world. And I think to offer proper tax advice today, you have to look at those three elements. Is it legally effective? Yes. Does it offend the spirit of the Income Tax Act, which kind of got codified mid-2005 to 2009? Yes or no? And then from a reputation or responsibility perspective, I think there's almost a third lens there around, is it responsible? Even if you can do it, and it doesn't mean you should. And I think that's just evolving today.
Sure.
We
and
see little of it in Canada. We see a lot of it in Europe. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But I just wanted, for the record, in fairness, KPMG admitted to criminal wrongdoing in the United States and agreed to pay $456 million in fines right around that period in time. So there may have been a deterrent, an X factor, as it were, in terms of moving us along that continuum of the three. Observation, not a question. I did want to ask you specific, though. I do find it interesting that you apply the three lenses, and I think it makes sense. How important to your practice is it the I guess I would say the truism that you tend to hire a lot of former CRA auditors and Department of Justice lawyers?
We have, I don't know what you define a lot to be.
50.
We've hired, last count of the 1,400 tax professionals that we have in KPMG Canada, I could count 7 or 8 that have come, and probably as many have gone from our organization to the CRA of the Department of Justice.
Okay.
I think it's healthy, frankly. I think the only way our system works in Canada is to have open, transparent dialogue between taxpayers, tax authorities, and tax advisors. And we hire for expertise, and there's some fantastic people within the CRA, and I'm glad we can be a bit of a career option for them.
Do you seek pre-opinions from Revenue Canada when you're developing these products to market?
You can get advanced tax rulings for in this particular case. We sought and obtained 2 legal opinions,
but not from CRA.
But no, there was no advanced tax ruling.
Why wouldn't you
with
do
respect
that?
To this.
If you knew that you could take it, and you already said that you value the expertise of CRA so much that you'll hire them, even though they have cooling off periods, why wouldn't you take the step of making sure that, given that you are on a thin line of tax evasion, tax avoidance, knowing the difference in law, why wouldn't you take that extra step to give your clients the assurance that they wouldn't be put through a legal test, which is extremely expensive, or that they would be found in contravention of the spirit of the law in Canada?
Even today, the use of advanced tax rulings is quite rare. It is something that we engage in, not very frequently. It tends to take a lot of time. It tends to be a fairly costly process. And clearly, in the time when this plan was developed, 1999, that would not have been a standard thing for us to do.
Do you think
more frequent today, but in those days, times have changed, and it was not something that we regularly would have done.
Do you think the possibility of criminal liability to the person who developed this product at your firm would be a deterrent from people seeking to go so closely to the line in terms of tax evasion and tax avoidance?
Well, just to be clear, I mean, the tax aspects of this plan, were fully vetted by the firm, by various committees within the firm, and it fully complies with the tax law. And not one but 2 outside legal opinions also support that assertion. So there's
okay. So you'd be comfortable if there was a law that said that the individual in a firm can be held liable for a product that they put together and put their name to?
There's been a couple of jurisdictions that have actually enabled that, and I don't think it's unhealthy at all. Like, I stand behind the quality of our people and the quality of the work that we do. If there are tax advisors out there that are skirting the law, which is something we never do, should there be consequences? Absolutely.
More than just what you go through as CPA. I appreciate the answers. Thank you very much.
Mr. Dussault, welcome to this committee, I believe, for the first time. The floor is yours, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the witness for being here today. We're happy that at the initiative of the NDP, we can get into the bottom of the KPMG case. The scheme you develop to make some taxpayers avoid paying the fair share of taxes. Can you confirm that you think the Isle of Man scheme is legal? It was legal at that time?
Well, absolutely. You know, if you think about the steps that we go through with that particular tax plan, first of all, it went through a detailed technical review by a first partner. It went through a detailed technical review by a second partner. Then it went through a review of our General Entity Avoidance Committee. Then we obtained an independent legal opinion as to the effectiveness of this particular plan, not once but twice, both from a Canadian perspective and an Isle of Man perspective. And then finally, it was signed off and approved by our managing partner of our national tax practice before it was ever implemented.
Thank you. And do you think it's putting some investment in an offshore company and getting back here to Canada as a gift from a company to another company? Do you think that kind of behavior is moral?
I think you have to look at it through two different lenses. I mean, if you think about the way that the Canadian tax rules have evolved, so in 1999 there was opportunities for taxpayers to use non-resident trusts to affect tax planning objectives. And those were under the scrutiny of the Department of Finance for quite some time. The rules were in fact changed with respect to non-resident trusts in 2013, retroactive back to January 1st, 2007. So, you know, from the time that this particular plan was developed, there was 13 or 14 years before the legislation actually shut down some of that similar planning. It was retroactive to January 1st, 2007.
Thank you, but
it wasn't until...
my question was, do you think it's moral to do that?
I think...
What is your standard in KPMG? Is it legal? Or moral is also playing a role in what you develop as a scheme?
That's that third lens I talked about the responsibility. Does it have the right fit for our clients? Does it have the right fit for us? Does it fit within our global code of conduct? We determined back in 2003 that was something that we were no longer prepared to implement as an organization. So in today's light, absolutely, back in 2003, that was the time when we suggested that was not something that we were
So now in
prepared to do.
2016,
So 2016, I mean,
you think it's not appropriate to
if it wasn't
develop a
appropriate
scheme like
in
that today?
2000 and if we decided in 2003 that we were no longer going to implement that plan, absolutely we would not implement that plan today.
Thank you. Et je vais parler un peu maintenant en français, Monsieur le Président.
I ask my question in French. I'd like to know whether the CRA was involved in developing such a plan, and if yes, who at the CRA approved such a plan, this strategy?
In 1999, there was nobody from CRA involved in the development of that plan.
Est-ce que parfois vous faites
Sometimes do you call on the CRA to approve or verify the legality of such a strategy? And how many other strategies do you have with other countries that have very low taxation? At times, do you call on the Revenue Agency, the CRA, to do that?
When we will seek advanced tax rulings on behalf of our clients. That's pretty rare. To your second question, which was you have to, the way the tax law in Canada has changed and the way the world on tax law has changed, there's two elements. There's business taxation for multinationals and there's taxation for individuals. In Canada, multinational corporations are expected to pay the tax that is owed in Canada on the profits that they make in Canada, And so to this day, there still is a lot of use of non-resident jurisdictions outside of the Canadian tax system, and that is fine by government policy as long as the income earned in Canada by the multinational corporation is taxed in Canada. For individuals, the way that the world has evolved today, including some of the legislative changes around non-residence trusts that took place in 2013 and a final change in 2014, individual citizens of Canada are expected to pay tax in Canada on their worldwide income, regardless of where it's earned. So that's the way the rules have evolved. That's the way the system's evolved. And as you know, from filing your tax return, hopefully within the last few days, on the second page, you have to actually tick off whether or not you have more than $100,000 worth of property located outside of Canada.
Thank you.
It's on that basis that our plans are effective today.
Thank you. I just have another question. If you are aware of something illegal and you have the name of the people who are involved into that, would you be able to provide the names of those people who commit illegal activity?
Under our professional rules, I'm speculating a little bit, but I believe that's our obligation.
Yeah.
If we believe it's illegal.
Yeah. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to move a motion. I can read it in English. That the committee compel KPMG to provide documents indicating the names of clients who use the Isle of Man tax sheltering scheme and the names of the KPMG employees responsible for the development and marketing of the tax scheme.
Do you have that in writing?
Yes, I do.
Here.
It is related to the issue we're discussing right now.
Phil, yes, there may be an implication on the court here that we'll have to look at as well. Phil, let you in.
Point of order. Mr. Chair, just the normal procedure is a 48-hour notice on any motions, and so this motion has come without that notice, I believe. We've not received it, so I just want to make that as a concern.
You can, Mr. Dussault, table the motion with the committee, and we can consider this as the opening notice of the motion. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, when we are discussing an issue, the issue at end, we can move a motion related to that issue. So I'd like to discuss it right now and be voted on.
Okay, we'll, and you are correct. When the issue is before committee, you can move a motion on that committee. We'll distribute the motion, and then we will talk about it.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Just wait till we get the motion. And that. We can, what I'm going to do is basically rule it out of order at this time. We will talk about it at business of committee at 12:30. The reason I would do that, Mr. Dussault, is under the sub judice convention, in which this request could have implications on a court case, that I don't believe we can deal with it at this time. So I'm going to rule it basically out of order. We will talk about it at the business of committee, but I do, and you want to challenge the chair on that, you can, but I do believe this might have implications on a court case that's ongoing.
So you say we will discuss it later?
We will discuss it at the business of committee between 12:30 and 1.
I respect your
Okay,
your
thank you,
judgment,
Mr.
Chair,
Dussault.
but,
Turning to Mr. Sabera.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Wiebe, for coming before us. I do wish to note I did serve on the CICA User Advisory Council for a number of years. I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but I did. And I can honestly say that if you're a good tax lawyer or tax planner, that you're obviously going to be sought after in today's world we live in. But nonetheless, the issue I have, and I think the issue a lot of Canadians have, is that we want to make sure that our tax system gives a confidence to all Canadians, that it's transparent, that everybody's paying their fair share, and effectively that honest Canadians are not subsidizing those that have the means or the wherewithal to implement tax measures or tax planning that raise red flags. And from my conjecture and reading, that this Isle of Man FCS structure obviously raised a number of red flags to see that. And I think, the estimates worldwide are literally in the tens of trillions of dollars that individuals have put into tax havens, if I can use that term, and tax avoidance structures, and potentially even hypothetically tax evasion structures. In Canada, I think in a prior report done by a prior committee, the potential tax gap is literally in the billions of dollars, which could be going to fund programs that Canadians need, and that would make our economy stronger. So it is, sitting here today, it is obviously with some disappointment that we are here. Nonetheless, we are committed, and we need to ask some questions. And you had alluded to this in your comments about the negotiated settlement agreements. And I take it over your long career that you probably partaken in a few with your clients. And I'd like to stick on this for a little bit. It is more common of a practice to enter into an NSA rather than go to the courts due to the length of time involved in the court system?
Yeah, that's been my experience by far. I think very few cases actually, from a tax perspective, go to court. Look, the Income Tax Act, like all law, is subject to interpretation, and there's two sides to there can be two sides to a story. I know from a client perspective, when I advise clients, they'll often try and settle without going to court, because it depends on their risk tolerance, but it's always subject to interpretation. Even if they feel that they've got a very solid case under the tax law, there's always some uncertainty. Court cases are very expensive. Lawyers are very expensive. And there's some uncertainty. It can take up to a decade for a tax matter to go through the courts. From CRA's perspective, I know that, well, I don't know, but I would imagine that from their perspective, if they can create certainty, if they can get a timely settlement so that they can take their resources and move them to other files, I'm sure that's what's driving their behavior. But if there's 80,000 formal notices of objection a year filed by Canadians because there's a dispute between what the taxpayer thinks is right and what CRA asserts is right, and there's only 3,400 cases amongst the courts, settlements happen routinely and daily.
Okay. Chair, Mr. I'm going to give my last minute to...
4 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to give my last minute
Okay.
to the parliamentary secretary. Minute and a half. Our government has in our budget, dedicated $440-odd million to CRA to assist them to strengthen their role in making sure that all Canadians pay their fair share of taxes. So I think that's something we need to highlight. My particular experience now as an MP is I've had constituents come to me with liens on their houses for potentially not owing just tens of thousands of dollars, or there's been a mix-up in their accountants, or their accountants actually haven't filed their taxes. While these few individuals here have benefited from a wherewithal of means to enter into an NSA. I think that's unfair. I think it's wrong.
We have 35,000 tax clients within KPMG Canada. 15,000 of them are individuals who need help in filing their personal income tax returns. The average fee that we would charge is $1,400 annually for tax returns. So, we're a Canadian firm. I mean, we've got offices in North Bay and Lethbridge and whatever, and we're helping all kinds of people comply with their tax obligations. So.
One more question, then I'll turn it over to the Parliamentary Secretary. The FCS structure, are there similar structures or amendments to that structure currently in place today and that KPMG is offering their clients?
For individuals, we don't offer any offshore tax planning, tax plans at all today. I think, as I said, the legislative world has changed. The legislation that came in 2013, retroactive back to January 1st, 2007, gave some very good indications around what was acceptable by the Department of Finance and what wasn't. 2014 was the last year that the Department of Finance allowed immigrants to use offshore trusts for putting monies offshore, but that was eliminated in 2014, 2 years ago, and that's kind of been the end of it, to be honest with you.
Okay. Mr. Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Sabera. Which Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Champagne or Mr. Duberg? Mr. Champagne, you have time for a quick one.
Merci, Monsieur Webby, d'être ici.
Thank you, Mr. Webb, for coming here. The government has invested more than $440 million to help the CRA get the technology and tools needed to deal with this, to better understand what you have said with respect to these tax schemes. These tax schemes, how do you develop them? We know our Prime Minister has talked about international cooperation. I would imagine when these tax schemes are produced, created, could you please explain to the committee how you set about creating such a scheme? And I have a second question. You know that we are going to be auditing the plans. We know that you have many years of experience. What do you do with the IRS compared to what you do here with the CRA? How do you go about implementing best practice, international best practices with those here in Canada?
The tax ideas that are developed in Canada, we go through 4 stages generally. Technical review to make sure it fits within the tax law. Second partner, then technical review to ensure that the first partner got it right. Then we have a review of our general anti-avoidance rule committee to make sure that it doesn't offend the spirit of the act, that it's so-called not aggressive tax planning. So yes, is it effective for the law? Yes, does it meet the tests of the general anti-avoidance rule? And then we have a new lens that we placed on our reviews in our tax practice here in Canada, as well globally. When I was a global head of tax, we instituted this as well. Starting in 2006, but codified in 2007, we also have what I'll call, is it responsible? Does it fit the needs of the client? Does it fit the needs of ourselves? And is it something that we would be proud of if it hit the paper? So
And
we have those 3
understand
tests.
that part.
Right.
You there, Mr. Champagne?
Sorry, I didn't get your second.
We're well over. Mr. Abdoutaf?
Thank you very much. I would like to get some clarity around the tax gap in Canada. And can you explain how tax avoidance tax gap situation has changed over last decades, as a first part of the question? And the second part of the question is, are these measures that have are there measures that have strengthened the fairness of the integrity of the system?
Can you just repeat the second?
Yeah, are there measures that have strength, the fairness and the integrity of the system?
Fairness and integrity. Okay. So your question on the tax gap, there is no Canadian data on the tax gap. A number of jurisdictions around the world analyze what the tax gap is. The tax gap is the difference between what the government expects to collect and what they actually do collect. Canada doesn't publish those figures. I do know that from my experience in dealing in my global role with a bunch of other jurisdictions, the primary driver of the tax gap is the underground economy. So it's those taxpayers, those citizens who have decided that they are outside of the tax system and they aren't going to report income. That generally is by far the largest bit of the tax gap. I assume it would be fairly similar from a Canadian perspective, but I don't know because we just don't have that data.
On the government side, there's that, as you just said,
Right.
but on your end, as KPMG,
Right.
do you see any changes, any positive changes? Do you see any, the gaps is being coming in closer?
Well, it depends on the jurisdiction. I mean, there are cultural differences that I've experienced around the world around taxation and the obligation as a citizen to pay. In Japan, everybody pays their tax because it's the right thing to do. In a lot of other jurisdictions, there's a massive underground economy. Greece is one that's often quoted. I'd like to think that Canadians are generally very compliant with the income tax system, and my belief is that there would be a much smaller problem around the underground economy than there we'd see in other jurisdictions around the world.
You know, the previous government have created something called Stop International Tax Evasion Program under budget
hotline.
2013.
Yeah.
Yes, the Conservative government.
Right.
Can you explain how that impact to ensure the integrity of and the fairness of our tax system?
I think it's important. I mean, the studies that have been done around the world would suggest that people are more willing to comply with their obligations under the income tax rules if they believe their neighbors are complying. And the only way society works is if everyone complies with and pays what they have to pay. And if there's a perception that your neighbor is doing something that isn't appropriate, then I think the trust in the system breaks down. The way the tax system is now it's pretty good in Canada. It's maybe okay around the world, but it's got a long way to go to get that trust back into it, frankly. I like the work that the OECD is doing around, the future of taxation, because I think that for the average Canadian, tax is way too complicated. They don't understand it. I've been doing it for a long time. There's parts I still don't understand. And there needs to be, in society, for there to be trust, there needs to be transparency, and there needs to be a perception of fairness. And I think sometimes that doesn't exist as tight as it needs to be, and that's why I think the international tax rules need to change. A lot of them are broken. Business is now global. Tax is national. And exists, frankly, too many disconnects between the national tax systems and the global business reality we have today.
So, as I can gather from what you have said, that there's psychological factors here in terms of how to deal with clients, as being the taxpayers are basically clients at the end of the day. And how do you approach that? How can the government better approach that in order to get the best result and to get people to practice less of tax avoidance?
Well, I like the approach the Canadian government has had over the last number of years around this entire issue on international taxation. As again, there's a perception out there that it's not fair, and so engaging in, I mean, there's some recent changes. Whether making sure that tax authorities have adequate resources to do their job properly, I think that's important. I think that the willingness of the Canadian Tax Authority to share information with other tax authorities. So for the first year, this year, 2016, is the first time that Canadian tax authorities are going to be sharing their advanced tax ruling with other jurisdictions where appropriate. I think that that's critical. I think that there is new rules coming into play that have been announced for the last couple of years, but they're effective this year, where a multinational corporation has to explain themselves about where are you conducting business and where do you leave the tax behind? Where are your operations? How many people do you employ? How much profit is there, and how much tax are you paying in all those jurisdictions? They're starting to collect that data starting this year and next year, and they're going to share it with other jurisdictions around the world starting in 2018. If you can't have that transparency amongst tax authorities in a global business environment, I don't think the system works. So the trend that we're on, that we're finally starting to see some momentum on, I think is the right way to go from a tax authority perspective and the government and society. Sorry.
Thank you both. Turning to Mr. McKinnon, 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Wiebe, for appearing today. You're responsible for global taxation for KPMG, correct?
Head of tax for KPMG International.
Et maintenant, vous êtes...
Now what are you?
Partner at KPMG Canada.
OK. Et pour être désigné...
And to be designated as Chief of Global Affairs KGBN, that's quite a big deal for a Canadian, no?
It was a nice honor for a Winnipeg boy to have that role, frankly, and it was probably the best job I ever had. Loved it.
Les responsables...
The responsibilities of someone responsible for international practices, would this be looking at development of tax thought or development of business?
Both. I mean, I was responsible for the strategy overall for the tax business for KPMG International. But I also would have been very cognizant of our responsibility, and that's why we developed and deployed our Global Tax Code of Conduct. If you'll just give me 1 second, I'd like to read a couple bits of it because I think it's important. It's something that I believe in and have been promoting for 4.5 years, frankly, in my previous role. A couple of aspects I'll just paraphrase. We act lawfully and with integrity and expect the same from our people, member firm clients, the tax authorities, and other parties with whom we interact. We provide tax advice to our clients to allow them to pursue their commercial objectives, respecting the needs of our people and the communities in which they operate. And we support a relationship with tax authorities based upon mutual trust and respect, which enables constructive dialogue and responsiveness by all parties in order to fulfill our responsibilities. I truly believe that there needs to be cooperation and dialogue between taxpayers, tax authorities, and tax advisors like ourselves.
Merci. Comment est
Thank you. KPMG is a partnership. Is it a partnership within countries? So profit and loss within the country or globally?
We're structured internationally as a network of 155 different member firms. So the Canadian firm would be a member firm, and the partners in Canada would partake in the profits and losses of that particular partnership.
Donc, il y a des services communs à l'échelle.
So there are common services that are offered internationally to which the country members contribute, and most of the accounting side of it, if you like, within your partnership is done within the countries themselves.
That's correct. And if you think about the evolution of our business from a tax perspective, especially dealing with multinational corporations, it's so complex now that the biggest growth area for us, frankly, was in cross-border taxation, whether that was international tax, whether that was transfer pricing, whether that was expat tax. That now is a larger part of our global business than the domestic part of the business, because heaven knows it's very hard to comply with Canadian tax rules, and as soon as a business decides it wants to expand in the States or sell elsewhere in the world, the complexity goes through the roof, and that's the area that we provide most of our services.
Est-ce que les honoraires conditionnels...
The conditional fees, are they part of your practice?
Contingent fees for quite some time, except in 2 areas. There are 2 areas remaining where we still provide services on a contingent basis, and it's because it's industry practice. So the one area is with respect to GST, HST, or provincial sales tax recoveries. The way the industry is, clients don't want to pay for you to investigate whether they've overpaid in those areas unless you can show a return. So industry-wide, that's still there. And then with respect to research and development. So if people are applying for research and development tax credits and there's a bunch of uncertainty there, we'll get paid, or we can get paid on a contingency basis. About 6 or 8 years ago, and I don't know the exact date, the Canadian or the Department of Finance introduced tax shelter rules. And something becomes a tax shelter if it has a contingency fee or a confidentiality agreement. We don't do tax shelters, except for those 2 areas. It was recognized at the time that those were 2 areas of tax where it was acceptable to continue to have a contingency fee. Otherwise, we don't have them.
Okay.
Sorry, Steve, we'll have time at the end for some supplementaries, I think. Mr. McColman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here and sharing your perspective on things. I'm going to kind of move in a couple of directions, but first, thank you for your comments about the initiatives our government took to combat some of the tax evasion, tax avoidance issues. Recently reported that our 213 measures brought in $1.57 billion in the 2014 fiscal year alone. So thank you for being complimentary about the initiatives we took to close some loopholes. I want to talk primarily about your views, and it's a little bit anecdotal on this. A little bit is experience in the mid-1990s in the building industry where I was president of Ontario Home Builders, and we tried to study the black market, the underground economy, to quantify it for the Ontario government of the day. And we came up with, through the study, an estimate that the government was losing somewhere around $6 billion, which was a fairly shocking number. It made the front page of the Globe above the fold. And so I'm fast forwarding to 2016, speaking with people in the accounting industry who are some of the top professionals about what the issues are right now regarding what people are doing in light of higher levels of taxation that they're facing. And these, in many cases, are people like your client base, which would be high net worth people who are looking for, every opportunity to pay their fair share, but not pay more than their fair share. So the anecdotal comments that I get back are, why concentrate on that? Why not go after the underground economy? Because it is rampant. This is what is some of the comments I'm hearing back. Now, I don't have empirical evidence to give you today, 2016. I have some from a study that we did in the mid-1990s. That said, and also around your comment that I think that is really kind of hits the nail on the head, which is, no pun intended, from the building industry, which is the fact that if your neighbor does it, then all of a sudden it validates that you should do it. So it's when they have their roof replaced and the guy says, here's the price for cash, $4,000. If you want to pay me, we can get an invoice, it's $5,500. This happens every day on every street in Canada. How, from your estimation, having the tax knowledge, do governments or where's money best spent in terms of making sure we get our fair share from that kind of underground economy that is anecdotally right now growing? I would put it that way. I would say the evidence is it's not being subdued, it's actually growing. Oh. Can you lend a perspective on that, please?
It's not really on the subject matter, but go ahead. It's just, we've talked about this several times, so go ahead, Mr. Wiebe.
Okay, I don't have any data from a Canadian perspective, but I believe from analysis I've seen in other countries that it is one of the fundamental issues that governments need to address because it is a significant part of the tax gap. And once it gets rampant, if people don't trust their neighbor to pay the amount of tax they should pay, then the system tends to break down. I think it's very difficult for the tax authorities to actually combat it. A lot of it is attitudinal within society that frankly today just shouldn't be accepted. Work around the whistleblower, work around more resources to enforce those particular areas. We all know that there's certain areas of the economy where there's more cash transactions that happen in other areas of the economy. So to have a laser focus on those particular areas would be another way to try to combat it.
I appreciate the chair's comment in the fact that it does veer off, and I agree with that. But in some ways, it's at the heart of the conversation here about the fact that the issue we're talking about here, which is how people avoid paying tax. And this scheme that was going on with your firm and with the product you were offering allowed people to either to defer or to somehow develop something legal, as you've said, to be able to move their money somewhere that they had to pay less tax on it. So I would say this, that for sure we need to do more, that we need to look into how people move their money around. But I think that there's a much bigger, especially with rising taxation, when personal taxes start to approach, combined provincial and federal tax start to approach the 50-plus range in most jurisdictions, then people who are high net worth start to say, is it worth it? Or have businesses start to say, it just isn't worth the effort to what I go through. So again, anecdotally, are you seeing that attitude unfold in any of your client base, or do you wish to comment on my comment?
At this particular point, the new marginal tax rates are fairly new, whether it's beer or whether it's anything else. I mean, people look to try to save taxes anywhere they can. And this is a personal comment. I think that we have to be careful, that we are competitive internationally and especially within North America. That means a corporate tax rate that's effective and fairly low. We're at the high end of the OECD average, and frankly, from a personal income tax rate perspective, we can't allow ourselves to get too far from where the United States is, or we will see people that will decide to buy their beer in a different province or move. It's just human nature.
Thank you both. Mr. Graywall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for coming today. This essentially is about tax fairness and the perception that all Canadians that make income should pay their fair share. Now, our Prime Minister has publicly stated that the international community has to work together to make global finance more transparent, to prevent the sort of inequality highlighted by the Isle of Man and the Panama Papers. So our government is committed in the budget to increase CRA's budget by $440 million. Now, my question goes to, would it be appropriate to say that KPMG stands to profit a great deal on such tax avoidance mechanisms? Now, you mentioned earlier that the firm made $1.6 million on implementing these 16 Isle of Man tax avoidance structures. How much of that money was returned because this structure ultimately did not work in the best interests of your client?
Well, the answer to that is none, because at this particular point in time, there hasn't been a determination as to the effectiveness of the planning. The matter is in front of the courts, I believe, in our court system. But at this particular point in time, there's been no need for a refund of any fees.
How? And we spoke about the average you charge an individual taxpayer $1,400 to file their tax returns. Now that's a far stretch from the $49.95 that H&R Block charges. Sorry, what?
You're behind the times.
Oh, I got the student rate up until last year. So. But more importantly, how much does KPMG do for pro bono initiatives to help Canadians that can't afford $1,400 to get tax advice from experts such as KPMG? and on a daily basis in our constituency offices, we don't deal with mega corporations complaining with the CRA because they can afford. And we don't deal with the wealthiest people either in Canada. We deal with the average Canadian who is being audited by the CRA and can't afford a KPMG to come defend them. And you know, there's a lien on people's homes, and individuals are you know, very, very uncomfortable, you know, with their tax situation. So does KPMG do pro bono work?
Yeah, there's two answers to that. The answer is yes. We help out every April. We go to seniors' homes to help on a voluntary basis to help them file their tax returns. I think that's critical. I think even though our tax system is getting simpler, it is still far too complex, and for the average individual to try and deal with their issues on filing their tax return, it's still too complicated. It needs to be streamlined somehow, in my humble opinion. Second, the second thing is, the one good news is that technology has enabled a lot of Canadians to be able to do more of their tax returns on their own. I said we do 15,000 personal income tax returns. I'll speculate that 20 years ago we would have done 150,000, but now people can do their tax return over the phone. They can have their information uploaded on their computer. You know, they can deal a lot easier with compliance issues than they would have through technology, and I think that's the trend that needs to continue, because if you want a self-assessing system to work effectively, you can't have someone struggle with trying to comply. It just isn't fair in my
framed my pro bono question by saying, how many pro bono cases do you do when people are being audited by the CRA? Because filing taxes is a lot simpler than helping people navigate the complicated structure. Now, people only hire you guys for your expertise, and I would highly encourage KPMG and other people in the industry to look into that. So you don't need to answer that question. On your code of ethics, the global tax code of conduct that you're extremely proud of, and I think it is very necessary for your industry, how much emphasis for new employees joining the firm is put on their relationship with tax authorities, particularly when they meet them at after work events, such as the tailgate parties and the soirees that we've been hearing about in CBC. Now, as a lawyer, a lot of emphasis was placed on that in law school, in the professional responsibility courses, and at the firm that I practiced at. So what is KPMG's thought on that?
Well, as soon as an employee joins us, they've got to take the one fundamental course, in my humble opinion, and that's acting with integrity. So everyone gets trained on integrity courses, and I've been doing it now. Every 2 years, you have to redo it, and I've done it quite a few times because I've been with the firm for an awful long time, because integrity and our ethics are core to who we are and what we believe in. But if I can talk a little bit about the other aspect, which is the relationship with CRA. The tax system only works in Canada if there can be a relationship between tax authorities, taxpayers, and tax advisors. And CRA has very, very stringent rules about what they can and cannot do. They cannot come out for dinner, they cannot join us, et cetera, et cetera. There was one, I hope there still is one limited case. So when we get together for tax conferences like the Canadian Tax Foundation, I was speaking at that one that you're referring to in 2010 on global tax trends or whatever. The fact is that you get you get a huge amount of tax professionals that attend, because we want to understand policy, we want to understand where planning is going, we want to understand global trends, et cetera. And CRA is there as well. And that's critical, because they need to understand what we're thinking about planning, what we're thinking about might be some opportunities, where there might be some tax areas to save some taxes, et cetera, because if they see something that they say we don't like it, well then they're in the know. Probably even more importantly, the most important parts of those conferences for me as a tax professional were to understand what CRA likes and doesn't like. What are they working on? What are they concerned about? What aspect of tax planning or tax policy is on their radar screen, because that's when I can properly advise my clients. Now, during those meetings, 2 or 3 day meetings, like the one in Vancouver, we have a breakfast that's sponsored by an accounting firm. We sponsor for $5,000 a coffee break. The law firm, one law firm, sponsors at night an opportunity for everyone, all members that attend the conference, to get together, to have a coffee, have a beer, piece of cheese, whatever else it is. I hope that that opportunity for CRA doesn't go away, because they should be treated like absolutely everyone else that attends those conferences. They shouldn't be felt to be any different than anyone else. And I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I've met a lot of people from CRA, and I can't imagine that a beer and a piece of cheese would impact their integrity in one way or whatsoever. I just don't think that that's, frankly, even fair.
I'll have to cut you both there. You're well over
We're just
time.
talking about wine and
Mr.
cheese.
Dussault, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was surprised to hear that you said you want to help getting back the trust of Canadians about the tax system. Because, well, my question would be, do you think that setting up a scheme in the Isle of Man for 16 people who can pay $100,000 a fee to get that scheme for them, do you think it helps getting back the trust of Canadians about the tax system?
I think if you look at that particular issue through the lens that we look at today, no. I think that if you look at that issue in the lens that existed at the time in 1999, where it was policy and practice for individuals to have monies in a non-resident structure offshore, it was a very different time. I mean, we used to smoke in restaurants in 2006. We used to text, in our cars up until 2 years ago. Times change and we change with it. Looking at it through that lens, it can't defend it.
Do you think continuing to set up complicated scheme by a bunch of lawyers and accountants to help avoid paying taxes? You said you are free, every taxpayer is free to arrange their affair as they see fit, as long as it's legal. But do you think it helps when multimillionaire clients of KPMG go to you and ask you if you are able to provide them a scheme to avoid the much taxes as possible? Do you think it helps getting back that trust that you said you want to get back?
That with respect isn't what we do. I mean, what we do for the 35,000 tax clients we have is we help them comply with the tax law, but we also provide planning. So if you're a successful entrepreneur that runs a pet food store and you make $200,000 a year, if you have that business as an individual, you pay $85,000 worth of tax. If we help them incorporate, they pay $25,000 a year in tax. We can save them $60,000 a year in tax. That's tax planning, and that's absolutely legitimate because the government policy is to allow small business owners, small and medium-sized business, to earn up to $750,000 of their income and pay a very, very low rate of tax. That's how we keep the economy going. So our role is, one, compliance, but also two, to ensure that our clients understand the opportunities that are available to them, all legal, all lawful, within the income tax system.
Just my last question, Mr. Chair, would be about the amnesty that was given to your clients. I know you cannot talk in details about that, but do you receive that kind of amnesty letter often at KPMG? So does other taxpayers do average taxpayers receive that kind of amnesty by CRA to avoid interest penalties and criminal rules?
Yeah, in general, well, every Canadian has the right to have a voluntary disclosure with the Canada Revenue Agency about issues that they want to report on their tax return. They've got the right, or they've got the opportunity to do it right when they file their tax return, but also after the fact. If there's something that they don't feel comfortable about, they have the right to go talk to CRA under the Voluntary Disclosure Program in Canada. That's a right every Canadian has, whether you're a waiter with undisclosed tips or whatever else it is. And those settlements, when you arrive at a settlement with the tax authority, with CRA, you end up paying the tax you otherwise would have paid plus interest. You don't fall into the penalty
But do you
regime.
see those kind of amnesties often?
Here. Mr. Ouellette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
5 minutes.
Yes, thank you for coming. Very much appreciated. So you mentioned to a previous member that you have 155 member firms, partner firms.
Yeah, we have 155 different countries around the world, yes.
So the Turks and Caicos,
I don't know off the top, but probably.
Principality of Andorra,
I don't know off the top of my
the
head.
Bahamas, Bermuda, the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, Cook
Barbados.
Islands, Costa Rica, Cyprus, Dominican Republic, Santa Lucia, Gibraltar, Malta, Monaco. Many of these are very well-known tax havens. What is your relationship then when you deal with, for instance, your other partner firms, like in these jurisdictions?
Well, okay, sorry, did I cut you off? Didn't mean to.
No, that's good.
Okay. So let's take Barbados as an example, because I've been to that office on a number of occasions. So, and you would have seen, I think, in the press over the last couple of days when they talked about tax havens, that Barbados was the #1 on the list as far as foreign investment going into Barbados. That's not individuals in Barbados. That's multinational corporations, Canadian-based, going into Barbados. And the reason why they do is because Canada has a tax treaty with Barbados. So Barbados enjoys a tax treaty just like Luxembourg does with Canada. A multinational in Canada can take some of its business operations, not that does business in Canada, but that does business outside around the world, and they can put it in Barbados. The profits earned in that particular jurisdiction are taxed at a rate of 2.5%. Instead of the 25% that they would have to pay if it was profit earned in Canada. And the Canadian government has, by policy, allowed its multinationals, when they expand globally, to use jurisdictions like Barbados to finance their international expansion, as long as they meet the tests around substance, etc. And for those of you who have been to Barbados, you'll see a lot of signs of businesses, the Canadian businesses that are actually operating there. Why does Barbados allow that? Well, Barbados doesn't have a lot of natural resources. They're not close to anybody. The only way they're going to get jobs or create a finance industry or whatever is to create an advantage. And that advantage is a very low tax rate, which Canadian businesses take advantage of. Ireland does the same thing. So.
Thank you very much. I have just a few comments. You mentioned to a previous member as well, you mentioned the medical profession, client-patient confidentiality, but also often I think doctors, when there's a communicable disease or it's in the interest of society, they are actually obligated to report that information. But I was just wondering what you believe the result would be on your profession if we allowed people to report tax avoidance or the breaking of tax law by others, and provided them with protection, allowed the person to retain 50% of the proceeds that might come from that tax avoidance, or from the resulting difference, essentially whistleblower protection. And what do you think the outcome would be for your profession?
I'm not concerned about the outcome for our profession. I know that Canada does have a whistleblower regime in place right now, and other jurisdictions do as well. That's appropriate. 50% would be way too high, frankly. I personally believe that would be way too high.
But that would be a very good incentive, though.
Well, it exists today. It absolutely does exist today. And as I say, I think Canadians should have the right to have a whistleblower if they feel that their neighbor isn't filing the appropriate amount of taxes.
But
from a profession perspective, I have absolute faith in our profession, and I'm proud of what we do. So I'm fine with that.
But if there was an accountant, for instance, and he knew one of his clients was doing some tax avoidance and was probably worth $4 million, and he could claim $2 million, perhaps he might have an incentive there too.
Oh, the accountant. Yeah, one of the first things we make sure is we understand who our clients are, and we do very thorough background checks to ensure that they have the right reputation, financial means, etc., for us to even deal with. We do not deal with clients that engage in tax evasion.
And I have a few seconds left. What's the average length of time that you stay with your clients? Do you know that information? So
I don't know.
Would it be possible to find out in Canada? So if, for instance, your clients are with you for 3 years or 5 years or 20 years, because I think that determines for me a lot of things about what people's interests are. They might use you for a certain level of expertise and then, drop KPMG because of your later on and do things by themselves later on. It's just
I think individuals, this will be general, I think individuals find someone that they know and trust as an accountant, and I think they tend to stick with them. I think the way multinationals look at the accounting profession today, they're looking for deep technical expertise. And so what we're seeing is there is, in the business community, there's more opportunity to use new accountants than there used to be.
Thank you both. In the remaining time, Mr. Leipert and Ms. Raitt will split their time, and Mr. McKinnon and Mr. Champagne will split their time on that side. So, Mr. Leipert.
Thank you, Mr. Wiebe, for being here. You've, in my view, brought a very professional approach to your presentation here today and answered questions, I think, with an awful lot of confidence that, in my mind. I guess as a finance committee, we are also here to probe and ask some questions at other times relative to a federal budget that was just introduced and saddled Canadians with a $30 billion debt going forward. And I'm sure glad that we're giving CBC another $675 million because it looks like they're using that money very well. Mr. Wiebe, back in 2013, the Conservative government budgeted $30 million, and 15 went to establish a new offshore compliance division with some 70 employees. Now, I believe that the CRA reported recently that in the 2014-15 fiscal year, over $1 billion in new revenue was derived because of that initiative. Now, in this recent budget, as has been mentioned by our friends across the way, some $444 million over 5 years has been invested. So if you start to do the numbers, do you really feel that that kind of an expenditure is going to give the return that that $15 million investment gave?
I don't know. I have the. I can't talk for CRA because I don't know. I do believe that CRA needs all the resources required to fulfill their duties, and that's important in society. Whether it's 444, 244, 844, I wouldn't be able to tell you that fact, but I think it is important that they get the resources that they need. If we as Canadians are expected to self-report, there needs to be a policing mechanism, and we saw a great return from the numbers you just quoted.
Right, but there is a diminishing return when you start to throw too many resources
at some point there has to be.
Right. I wanted to ask one other question on, you made a comment earlier about our national tax system needs to reflect global reality, and I'd like a little bit more of an explanation on that because I'm from Alberta, and I was interested to hear that you had formerly worked in Calgary, so you were familiar with the flat tax system in Alberta, and we woke up about a year ago to an NDP government that decided to tax high-income earners 50% more than the day before. We have a federal government who has also now decided it's time to slap high-income earners with an additional tax. I'd be curious to know your comments on whether or not you see those kinds of increases in personal income tax as a good thing for your business, where people are going to be looking for advice on how they can, I wouldn't say avoid paying taxes, but more reasonably take home somewhere a little bit more than the 50% that these two governments have now slapped on them.
Yeah, we are not seeing any. We are not seeing any appetite from our clients from getting more aggressive from a tax perspective. As I said earlier, I do worry. I think that there's some natural things that I look for as a tax professional in the tax environment. It needs to be simple. It needs to be competitive. It needs to be transparent. And anytime you get above 50%, that concerns me a little bit, especially with the competitor down south. And our corporate tax rates, I think, are 26% right now. The OECD average is 23. Ireland's at 12.5. UK's gone to 19. It's moving to 18 or 17. We need to make sure we do not fall out of the favor of multinationals by not being competitive, because frankly they're the ones that they move capital anywhere around the world. They can create jobs anywhere around the world, and knock on wood, Canada is a good place to do business, and I hope that continues.
Great. Very quick one.
Yes. CRA employees, former employees who come to work for you at KPMG, are still obliged to follow through on an oath that they take as an employee. What do you have in place at KPMG to ensure that they are carrying out their oath?
So in all of the employment letters that we provide to them, we ask them to explain to us specifically what their duties, fiduciary duty is, or legal obligation is to their former employer, whether that's CRA or anyone else. They've got to list that out. We also make it clear in the offer of employment that we expect them to fulfill their duties to their former employer. And that's fundamental. And then every year they're to certify that they have fulfilled those requirements, because we take it very seriously. I mean, absolutely seriously. So that's why we also have an annual certification that they have met those requirements.
It's self-disclosure, though.
Thank you very much.
Self-disclosure, yes, it is.
Mr. McKinnon and Mr. Champagne.
Je pense que...
Thank you. I believe you said earlier that you don't accept contingency fees, but that there are 2 exceptions, correct?
Contingency fees for those 2 exceptions. Yep. So yes, we do. So we do indirect tax recovery work, and we do R&D work and on a contingency basis.
Dans le cas des fusions, des acquisitions.
In the case of acquisitions and mergers, I have 2 parts to my question. Do you accept a percentage derived from a transaction or an agreement on a contingency basis? And what are your general observations with respect to mergers and acquisitions on an international scale? With respect to the motivation, the transactions that are really based on the logic of a certain tax scheme that's more efficient and effective for the new entity. Could you give me your comments on that, please?
M&A work that we do is generally on an hourly basis with a cap. That's just the way the industry goes. As far as M&A that's being driven by tax issues, the best example is probably the large deals that have happened recently from the U.S. So the U.S. has a very expensive and very unique corporate tax system. It's much more expensive corporately than any other jurisdiction, and many U.S.-based multinationals are trying to escape their taxation system by finding an appropriate head office or a business that has a head office outside of the U.S. that they can merge with and move their head office and their operations outside of the U.S. because it's far too expensive in the States. And that gets back to the concept I had around being tax competitive. Right now, Canada compared to the U.S. is very tax competitive, and that's why you've seen certain M&A deals happen within the last couple of years. I don't mention any client names, but where the headquarters are now here, I think that's very good from a Canadian perspective. And to the extent that we can encourage U.S. multinationals to put their headquarters here in Canada because we've got a competitive tax situation compared to theirs, I think that's fantastic for our country.
Mr. Champagne.
Yeah, Mr. Wait, let me go back to my line of questioning. As you know, we've made historic investment to combat tax evasion. I'd like to draw on your 30 years of experience and say, give me 3 best practices that government have implemented around the world that would be most effective to combat tax evasion.
Oh,
You may want to come back to me, but if you have in the minute we have, would be certainly interested because, you know, as you know, that money that we're going to be putting is to put the tools, the system, the technology in place. Just like to draw on your experience. You have 30 years of experience as the head of international taxation. What are the 3 measures that have been the most effective to combat tax evasion?
Well, we have a few of them in Canada right now. First of all, many jurisdictions have listed those transactions or those attributes around transactions that they don't like. U.S. has a whole list of things that they don't like. The U.K. has something similar. We have our tax shelter legislation, which basically says if there's a contingency fee or a confidentiality agreement, or it's designed to be packaged basically for a tax benefit, CRA gets notified on that. I think that is a very important. I also think that a lot of it just comes down to the effectiveness and attitude of the tax authority. There are tax authorities around the world which are willing to engage with taxpayers and tax advisors that like to say, we don't like this stuff and we're going to come after it. And that changes behavior immediately. If we're sitting at a conference somewhere and they're on the stage and they say, you know, there's this particular plan out there, we need to tell you that we don't like it. It doesn't happen very much after that. You know, even if the technical rules would suggest that maybe they're wrong. It's that ongoing engagement with the taxpayers and the tax authorities about what they feel is right and what they don't feel is right. Being reasonable and being proportional and professional in all situations, that makes a big difference.
So what you're saying is that the signal that the government has given recently that we're going to go against, you know, combating tax evasion, that's an effective way to indeed reduce tax evasion.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais demander.
Mr. Chair, I would ask the committee to have the privilege of asking a very quick technical question to our witnesses, and I would ask for a quick answer.
Quick technical question because we do have to adjourn. We'll give you one question.
Thank you. I would like you to give us the approximate monetary value for tax shelters for your client, and I'd ask you to give a breakdown of this monetary value, whether it be individuals, corporations, or banks.
Knowledge, we have no tax shelters that we sell to any of the 3 types of clients that you talked about. We do tax planning, and I wouldn't be able to tell you the relative fees with respect to that. But you know, the tax shelter regime in Canada is something that we're just not part of.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. St. Marie, Mr. Wiebe, and would thank everyone, and especially the witness, for the calmness of this discussion on what has been in the country a quite explosive issue when we get calls in our offices. So we shall suspend and go to committee business in about 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Wiebe, Mr. Jamal. so Ron's now convened. Mr. Caron.
Rapidement, pour commencer, j'aurais une question.
To begin with, I have a question.
Hearing.
Can you hear me now?
I couldn't. I'll try this. See if that works. I couldn't hear Mr. St. Marie at all on those mics on that side. I can hear them. Try it now, Guy.
Oui, alors.
I have two questions. Is it working? I'm speaking. Can anybody hear me? Okay.
All right.
You gotta bring your own mic.
I got. I might have to. I don't. No, it's this unit. No, it's this unit. Go ahead, Guy. Sorry.
Ma compréhension.
The way I see it, the decision made with respect to the motion tabled by Mr. Dussault, is it working now? I'll start over. I have 2 or 3 questions, and I need a quick answer. The first one pertains to your chair's ruling on Mr. Dussault's notice of motion. It was declared inadmissible until this point, so we could discuss it right now. the second question is, according to your discernment or judgment, in your opinion, would it be out of order, or could we debate this? And I have a third question, depending on what you say now.
If you were to turn to the information that was provided to us by the Library of Parliament, they indicated that the income tax, for the purpose of ensuring compliance with the Income Tax Act on 12th of February 2013, the Minister of National Revenue applied for a court order against KPMG LLP, requesting that KPMG provide the CRA with certain client information. The court order, which was awarded on 18th of February 2013, was immediately challenged by KPMG. That challenge is currently unresolved. Now, if you turn to the sub judice convention, which I originally thought we would be in violation of, and we still could be. It says in the House of Commons Procedures and Practices that it is, quote, "It is accepted practice that in the interest of justice and fair play, certain restrictions should be placed on the freedom of members of Parliament to make reference in the course of debate to matters awaiting judicial decisions, and that such matters should not be the subject of motions or questions in the House." And that is getting, I mean, your motion is getting pretty close to that line in terms of the court case. The people at the, we'll call them legal, basically said it's inadvisable for the chair to rule a motion out of order on the basis of sub judice. The chair, it don't matter, I already explained that. The imposition of the convention should be done with discretion, and when there is any doubt in the mind of the chair, a presumption should exist in favor of allowing debate and against the application of the convention. So what I would suggest, Mr. Caron, in terms of the motion, is that it can be, I would say it can be debated. We can debate that motion. But we should keep in mind what it says in the rules and procedures that I really think we're really pretty close to the line. So we would then
Point of order, Mr.
Go ahead, Mr. McKinnon.
I believe that there were motions filed with the committee with notice. And just in terms of ordering our committee business today, in what order should they be considered?
The motion that Mr. Dussault brought forward earlier is allowable because it was in reference to the discussion that was on the table with the study we're doing into at the moment on KPMG CRA. So that motion, I would say, is on the floor at the moment first, and then we will, in this session, we will quickly deal with a couple of items on budget for the committee, and then go to motions that have been given notice. Mr. Ouellette.
Just a question.
Mr. Ouellette.
Quick question. Not being very familiar. So if we request this, it's already before the courts. They've refused to provide it to the government. Could they then refuse to provide it to us? And then what recourse would we have as a committee to then request that information? Would we as well have to start a court case, or would we have to call them to the bar, or whatever these terms here, or call them back to explain their conduct? And what would be the repercussions?
I don't have the answer to that question. I can. We can probably obtain it from people. Mr. Caron.
Je comprends toute la délicatesse.
I understand the sensitivity of the issue. We have to proceed cautiously. I do understand that the ministers are involved, but as a committee, however, we did make a commitment to look into the case regarding KGBM, and it's a decision that was made by this committee to get to the bottom of the matter. If the minister's request is accepted by the court, that doesn't mean that the committee itself will have access to the information. So our ability to be able to continue with our study will be made much more difficult. Another legal aspect that we have to bear in mind is that pertaining to the 5 individuals, and that matter is still before the court, and I understand that it's difficult to get the names of individuals who are now before the courts. And it's so that would be quite acceptable to exclude these people from the list. And if this committee is in fact serious to get to the bottom of things, to look at the whole Isle of Man KGBM involvement, this is what we need to do. We have to proceed. Let's also remember that Mr. Wibb testified. He said that all the individuals employed who participated in this tax scheme should be reported. And I think what came out of all this session is that this was not the case. So I think that KGBM will not necessarily refuse to provide us with the employee list, the list of those employees that were involved. And this would be essential as part of our witness list so that we could continue with our work. I would move this motion. I think we should study this motion as it reads, and you can withdraw the names of the 5 individuals who are currently before the court, but it's our responsibility to vote in favor of this motion so that we can continue our work on this issue.
Straight. The motion and Madam Clerk, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. I'm under the assumption that the motion is on the table, or does it need to be removed? It's on the table. Okay, then the motion is on the table. Ms. Raitt.
Thank you very much. While I understand what my friends are attempting to do in terms of moving the ball down the field of getting to the bottom of an issue, my concern is this. The terminology compel is more than just requesting. What it does do is it says that we must take, in my view, every action possible, which could include litigation. And I don't think we can make a decision that includes the possibility of litigating whether or not parliamentary privilege has a higher calling than solicitor-client privilege or client privilege, whatever the terminology is for KPMG, in terms of protecting interests. I don't know whether or not that's a legal battle that this committee is fully understanding the ramifications of and have legal advice on before we take a decision to do this. So I know I'm being legalistic in my application to this. While I understand, as I said, the intent of it, I'm very concerned about the long-term, long-run costs associated with doing this. My suggestion would be to wait until the end of the court proceedings and then compel CRA through the government to provide us with that information, if that's the route and that's what the intention is. Up until that time, I have great concerns about having a finance committee try to go through the hoops that would be necessary in order to get KPMG. They will litigate this until they have exhausted every line of appeal because they have to in order to protect their reputation as protecting information. So we're going up against a large brick wall, Mr. Chair. And while I applaud and appreciate the intention, as I said, the process with respect to this is too onerous, too difficult, and too expensive.
Just to, in part, answer the point that you had raised to Ms. Raitt and that Mr. Ouellette had raised, the further recourse, I'm told, if we didn't get the information, would be that the committee would report back to the House that they did not obtain the information they requested. So that's what I'm told by the people that are involved and have experience in these kind of ventures by committee before, that the committee would report back to the House that they did not obtain the information they requested. In any event, the motion's on the floor. Mr. Caron?
It's not a request, though. It's a
Yeah, it's compel.
request. If it's a request, it's a different motion and it's a different analysis. Compel is very difficult.
Okay, Mr. Caron. And then we'll go to the question.
Je comprends la...
I do understand Mrs. Rait's reticence. The whole question is, how long do we wait? Are we going, will the court make a ruling this month, in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time? We have no idea. And in 12 months' time, we're going to be looking at something else. So we had always left it open. We were always prepared to listen to other witnesses, but as for the court ruling, whether it comes out in a year and a half's time, that's much too late. I think that the motion as it reads, I do understand the problem with the word compel. Perhaps we could have 2 or 3 minutes to reconsider the wording and get back to the proposal made by Mrs. Raitt.
And you think about it, whether you want to change that word, and there might be unanimous consent to change it. And while you're thinking about that, we will deal with some of these other issues. Okay, we have 2 budget proposals before the committee. Just wait till I say what they are in case there's more money than you. One is the study into the Canada Revenue Agency's efforts to combat tax avoidance and evasions. We would believe that the amount requested there is for $3,500. You're moving, Mr. McKinnon? Do we need a seconder? No. We don't need a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The second one is the budget matter request for budget main estimates on 2016-17 votes 1 and 5 under the Canada Revenue Agency. The amount requested is $500, moved by Mr. McKinnon. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We do have some other motions to deal with, but before we get to that, in order for scheduling for the clerk especially, today we're dealing with the CRA and committee business on the 5th. We're also dealing with CRA, the study into tax avoidance and evasion, in the first hour and a half, first hour. Yeah, there's 11 to 1. So first hour, we're dealing with the commissioner, and chief executive officer of CRA, and then then following that, we're dealing with the wrong one. The officials are staying, and then we're dealing with the C-15 we have on here.
No, that's next week.
Okay. Then it's all officials of CRA. So that's on the 5th.
We have Justice.
Yeah, there's somebody from
Yeah,
Justice.
somebody from Justice is in the in the mix. But there was a request by you, basically, Guy, to on the Budget Implementation Act that we needed to meet fairly heavily on the week of the 9th to the 13th. It seems that the bill may not be out of the House, but I would suggest if we were to meet on the Monday from 3:30 to 5 with officials on the subject of the bill.
Officials are coming on Tuesday morning.
They're coming Tuesday morning. Okay, then if we met with officials on the Tuesday on the subject of the bill, We can meet Wednesday if you like, and Thursday if you like, on witnesses. I know there's witnesses have come forward from all parties, and that would get us some way down the road to dealing with Bill C-15. We can't deal with the bill as a whole until it goes through the House, but we can deal on the subject matter prior to it coming out of the House. Mr. Caron.
Lorsque j'ai proposé qu'on se rencontre,
When I suggested that we meet during the week of May 9th, I was under the impression that the bill would have been dealt with and gone through second reading, because at that time, when I suggested it was mid-April. Now I'm a little bit reticent to start doing this before second reading has even begun. So this poses a problem. If we did this for the medically assisted dying bill already, but that's a dangerous precedent. All of the debate, though, had been done at the House, and then we were able to discuss the matter in committee. If we start hearing from witnesses while the debate's still going on, in all honesty, what do you think what's the second reading debate all about? What's the purpose? I'd be hesitant to begin studying this matter immediately. The other aspect that I wanted to discuss was that when we made this proposal, we didn't know what the BIA would be. And now that we know it's a 110-page document with some very complicated issues involved. So I think that it might be worthwhile to postpone this discussion later on in the week so that we can study not only the implications of the bill before second reading is finished, but also determine how much time we want to spend on the Budget Implementation Act here in committee. I think that the rules provide for the possibility to study a bill based on subject matter. So as for the government side, we want to get this matter studied as quickly as possible. I don't see why we have to wait for second reading before we can begin discussing the bill.
Caron, Mr. McColman, and we are going to run out of time here.
les règlements le permettent de manière exceptionnelle.
The rules allow for this, but it's an exception. Nothing justifies such an exception. We have until June, and then the Senate will look at it. So nothing compels us to begin this study during the week of May 9th. Especially when but if the rules allow for this, it's one thing to say that the rules allow it, but you have to bear in mind the spirit. It should be done on an exceptional basis. I still have the floor, Mr. McKinnon. We have bills that are studied before they're even fully debated at second reading. So I want the government to understand the importance of the role that the House may play in debating these bills. And I would like this committee acknowledge the fact that we have had more than a month to study, this bill. And now that we're aware of how long this bill is, and now that we're aware of how complex it is, there's transparency involved here, and respect for the House of Commons, and respect for Parliament.
We are beyond our committee time frame. We will have to adjourn. We'll have to try and find some time for committee business at the meeting on Thursday. The clerk and others have to deal with lining up witnesses for the week of for the meetings on the 10th and the 12th at least. So we will have to deal with that at the next meeting. I know people do have commitments around 1 o'clock, so we can't continue. So, and we also have the It'll give you a day, Mr. Caron, to think about that motion. We will come back to it. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.